How many of you, I'll introduce myself here in a second, how many of you have done Startup Weekend before? Okay, so quite a few. How many of you are familiar with Verge and Indianapolis tech community? Okay, cool. So my name's Brian Deyo. As he said, we launched our company at a Startup Weekend about a year ago. At that time it was a different name, and I'll get into the story a little bit here in a second. If you have an iPhone, you'd like to download our app. We actually just launched our app, so you can try the QR code thing. My name is Brian Deyo. Like I said, we launched the company out of Startup Weekend about a year ago, and I've been working with LastBite full-time since July. I quit my job in July, and me and a co-founder have been going at it full-time. So I kind of have the full gamut of Startup Weekend experience. We had a great experience here, and then kind of a 5-month period after that, and then dove in full-time here recently. So let me, the goal of my talk today is to just help you get the best and the most out of this experience. I think Startup Weekend is fantastic. I had a great experience when I think about it. I just was rushing here through the traffic jam and realizing like that exciting morning when I drove in on Saturday morning after working late Friday night. And it's an exciting time. I think you guys will get a lot out of it, but I want to sort of help you get the most out of it. So I'll talk about 3 things, just kind of my general startup experience, and then Startup Weekend tips, so how you can get the most out of not only your time here in the 48 hours you have left, but also the time after Startup Weekend. And then just real quick general startup advice. So my startup and then Startup Weekend experience, after college I had no idea what I was going to do. I changed plans at the very last minute and ended up writing my resume on the way out the door kind of college, and ended up at Cha-Cha for 2 years. That's kind of the foundation of my experience. It was a great time. I couldn't have picked a better 2 years after college with the degree I had. It just was perfect. So I've been in the startup world for 3.5 years now, and got a really cool like trial by fire at Cha-Cha. It was a great experience. Got to work with a fantastic team, and it's just a really good way to go. So shortly after Cha-Cha, Startup Weekend November happened a year ago, and we launched Eat, Drink, It was the name of the application at that point. The idea was to let you rate specific food items at a restaurant. So there's a lot of applications like Yelp or Urban Spoon that let you rate a specific place, but we were kind of jumping down in granularity to let you rate a food item, because the dining experience is more than just a single place, about a single place. So after Startup Weekend, I actually took a job for about 6 months, and then quit that in July, and now we're working on LastBite full-time. So we've rebranded. The 7 co-founders that we had leaving Startup Weekend have all since dropped out, and my co-founder and I quit our jobs and we started full-time in July. So that's kind of a quick shot of what my experience was, and a lot of that is related to Startup Weekend. Both the time here and the time after Startup Weekend really was influential in my life. It's defined a lot of what I'm doing now. So let me give you, based on that, a couple quick tips about Startup Weekend. So in the next 48 hours, I would encourage you to do a couple things. And the first is make sure you have the right expectations about this weekend. And I'd say those expectations should be similar to the expectations you have about any startup. So you should shoot for starting a great company after 48 hours. But just like any other great startup, you should also recognize that failure is kind of the default for most companies. So just keep that in mind. I think it'll be beneficial. However, having said that, in the next 48 hours, only think about the next 48 hours. With your team, don't spend a lot of time thinking about the company after the 48 hours. Just focus on doing the best job you can at pitching an amazing company that has a shot at winning the competition. So stay strictly focused on pitching the best pitch you can in the next 48 hours. But then within that, I would suggest right away when you get together with your teams, some of you will pitch ideas that you've been thinking about for a really long time and that you've had a lot of thought and put a lot of processing into. And others of you will just thought of an idea in the chair, pitched it, and everybody likes it and you're going for it. So establish that right away. Have a conversation right away when you talk with your teams where the genesis of the idea came from. Because if you've been working on something for a really long time and processing it for a year or more prior to this, you want to let your team members know that so that you can sort of flesh out some of those thoughts and not just have them pivoted into nothing and then lead to frustration. And, but if you've also just pitched something that you thought of in the last 15 seconds, then let them know that as well so you can sort of expand on that idea and work on it together. I think that was something that was both good for me and frustrating. I had been thinking about my idea for a very long time before I pitched it here, and it sort of got morphed a little bit, and probably not in a way that I would have liked to, and had I thought about it more, I would have maybe resisted a little bit more. But I also had great feedback, and so just set that groundwork right away. Set the expectation with your team, and then you have a great foundation to build on from there. So then in the day that you're done pitching, so Sunday night when you're done pitching, have another meeting with your team and talk about what happens next. That would be my biggest admonishment after going through that myself, is if you're serious about starting a real company, get a lawyer involved, commit to it right away. If you can't commit $500 to get a lawyer involved, then you're probably not ready to commit to the company. So I would say do that right away, and if you don't really want to commit to it, then just end it and be done. Come back next year or start another company. But the moment that pitch is done and everybody's clearing out, get together, figure out what you're going to do, and make a plan for like the next couple months. It just will make things go a lot smoother. Okay, so I think that's general tips for this weekend. Let me give you some quick startup advice, and this is sort of the blind leading the blind here. I totally understand that I'm not an expert at startups, and I haven't been successful yet myself, but I've been in them, and now I've been running one for 5 months. There are some quick things that I think will be helpful. And I'm just going to read these quotes. This first quote is actually from a guy analyzing startup school in Stanford, and this was sort of one of the biggest themes coming out of that weekend, which was don't start a company just for the sake of starting a company. Don't start a company because it's cool. Don't start one because you think it's going to turn out like it does in the fictional movies, because it won't. Death is the default for startups. Sorry, this is depressing. Don't start a company because you want to be like the founders you see at startup school, or want to be the next Google, Facebook, Twitter, etc. So let me keep that in mind. We'll come back in a second. And the next thing, this is sort of famous from Steve Jobs. The problem with the internet startup craze is that too many people are starting companies. Excuse me, it isn't that too many people are starting companies, it's that too many people aren't sticking with it. So if you combine those two themes, you get the default of startups is death, and the reason most of them die is lack of persistence. So I'm sorry that's such a kind of a Debbie Downer statement, but so then the conclusion here is come up with something you're passionate about. Make sure it's a good idea, refine it, and really work on it. Make sure it's a good idea, and then stick with it. And I think if you do that, and if you do that in the next 48 hours, you'll be much better off than most people trying to start a company. So, if you have any questions, free to ask. If not, good luck. Enjoy.